Welcome to the podcast from HeadHunters Northwest. HeadHunters Northwest, specialized recruiting, specialized approach, where we take you behind the scenes into our customers' businesses. For over 20 years, HeadHunters Northwest has served the global defense, small arms, and shooting sectors worldwide. Listen in as we discuss the inner workings of our USA and international customers. HeadHunters Northwest, finding you the best heads for business.
Welcome to another podcast of HeadHunters Northwest. And you may know Jeff Stawiarski. He's been on the podcast before. And of course, in the industry, he's accomplished a ton on his own. We should just do a podcast about your background at some point, because that's actually really interesting. But I digress. We're here today to talk about the position that I am recruiting for on behalf of ZEV Technologies for a director of operations. And Jeff is the co-president of ZEV Technologies. And we're going to talk a little bit about ZEV and the position and how you can learn more about it. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you for making the time for this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Shaylene. I appreciate that as well.
So let's talk a little bit about ZEV, because this is a great chance for you to let the industry and people not in the industry, and I know there are a ton of ZEV Technologies fans because their products have been amazing. Talk to us a little bit about what the changes have been going on. Give us a quick history of ZEV Technologies. Where did the company come from, and what has it been best known for in the firearms industry?
Okay. No, so ZEV actually originated back in 2006, and the company was best known company producing performance pistols, competition pistols, and initially the company was really best known for all of the Glock parts that they were producing, triggers and upgraded parts for Glock platforms. So that's how they actually got on the map. And then over the years, they progressed into continuing to grow their pistol line and then getting into rifle platforms, ARs, etc. So 2006, you've got a pretty rich history. A lot of people know the ZEV brand. It reached a peak, and then unfortunately, with just the way the market changes and lack of innovation, things started to slip. So, now they've gone through a big initiative to reinvest in the organization, and I can talk more about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, you can move right into that, because really we want to hear about this exciting opportunity and why it's exciting. And I think people need to know, what's the big change? Like, you've not only moved from Centralia, Washington to Riverton, Utah, but there are, massive changes and really exciting growth here. Can you talk about what's changed and where you're headed?
I would say, so I've been with the organization for close to 4 months. I've been in the firearms industry for over 20 years. So I've seen a lot of change in the industry myself, ammunition, optics, firearms. But with ZEV, they are part of a group called Syndicate. Under the Syndicate umbrella, we've got some sister companies, Unity Tactical, Esca Optics, Silencer Co. So the venture capital group, it's very well funded, and they're very focused on premium brands and investing and helping these brands grow. So when they acquired ZEV, that was one of the initiatives. They wanted to resurrect the brand and bring it back to its heyday. So, they've given us an opportunity to move ZEV from Washington into Utah, where Silencer Co. is based. We've got shared services and manufacturing, a very wide and deep resources with engineering, quality, manufacturing, supply chain. And at ZEV, right now, we're investing heavily into the organization, the culture, the people. Just recently, we just brought on a new VP of sales, a new director of supply chain, a new director of quality. And we know what it's going to take, and so does our board of directors and our leadership team, to go ahead and get repositioned in the marketplace.
If you don't mind, just to put this out there, when you're saying that there's all these new positions, these are not replacements. These are not people that were there. You have moved the company to a new state, and a lot of the people weren't able to move or weren't invited to move. There that many people. This is a whole different team because you're actually building a different company in many ways. So this is all planned. It's not replacing people or anything like that, right? I mean, and also, when you said you're there at the same area of Silencer Co., you actually have your own building and own facility. So you're not actually sharing a facility.
Correct.
Right.
So we're in a brand new building in Riverton, Utah, and you're correct. We had a fair amount of people that did not make the move to Utah.
Yeah.
So we've gone out into the marketplace, and one of the initiatives that we have is we're not settling for D and C players. We're looking for A players.
Right.
Some of the recent new hires, quite a few of them have come from the aerospace industry. Some have come from the firearms industry, but we're looking for a very high caliber level of talent, and we've found it. And I'm watching our team grow. And it's exciting, a lot of encouragement, the enthusiasm, the passion from a culture standpoint. I'll be the first to admit, I didn't know the old ZEV. I heard a lot of stories about the culture, but the culture today, the new culture is all based on integrity, respect, trust, working with a sense of urgency, having fun. My two ticklers are strong communication and collaboration, and also making sure that everyone on the ZEV team has a voice. And, just in 4 months, I'm watching this new culture take shape, and it's moving in the direction as we planned. So,
Yeah, you're not just interviewing for skill set, you're interviewing for culture fit because these these core positions with this director of operations as being a key part of that, these are the people that are going to bring this company to life and then hire people who also fit that as you build out the team, right?
exactly. I believe from my experience, I've worked for some really good organizations where the cultures were strong, and I'm trying to duplicate what I've learned at some of those companies and bringing best practice, bringing a culture mentality, one that is a culture of success, one of best practice, and a culture that likes to win and also have fun, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you spend a lot of time at work, and we're having fun. We're celebrating little victories. We've got a big victory coming up in the next few days. Have a tremendous July. So proud to report that we've exceeded expectation for the month. It's been the first time in a long time that they've been able to do that. But I think it just goes to show with all the changes that we're making in the
Yeah.
structure, the organization, implementing processes, but the talent is making the biggest difference. And even our vendors, we see our vendors stepping up, wanting to help be a part of the solution. And then even resources from our sister companies, they're stepping in to help move us along. So in my opinion, we're much further ahead than what I expected, because when you're trying to fix something that's been struggling, it takes time.
Yeah.
So we're tracking ahead of schedule. It's a
That's
good thing.
great. Let's talk a little bit about paint a picture of what's being built. Let's talk about the Riverton facility. What does it look like once it's fully stood up? Assembly, then manufacturing. Kind of walk us through that phased vision because we want the person who we're searching for to hear about and learn about. What do you envision that being? What does the future look like there in even 1 to 2 years?
So so right now we're occupying a very large space in the syndicate building. So we're part of syndicate. We're utilizing shared services, marketing, human resources, accounting, and finance. We are looking at a adjoining piece of property that's about 10 acres. And the plan is we'd like to build another facility there, and that will house ZEV in that
Wow, that's
building.
pretty exciting already.
It is. And, I commend our CEO at Syndicate. Lance has got a great vision, and, he's well connected with the board. The board's very realistic and excited about, the opportunity, also additional acquisitions. They talk about premium acquisitions.
Mhm.
So, I've had a chance to understand what this new building could look like. But right now, we just made the move. We've
Mhm.
got manufacturing services through Syndicate.
Yeah.
And then we've got our assembly and our distribution and our inventory all set up. And it actually looks pretty good.
And it's up and working. It's up and
Yep.
going. You just
Functional.
a ton of product.
We're building the OZ9s. We're building the FDPs. We're getting ready to start building some rifles. So, everything is, you've got your growing pains or your moving pains that we went through.
Yeah.
Um, but everything's tracking. And, I think from the staff that we currently have, a lot of people are wearing a couple different hats.
Mhm.
And, I'm a big advocate of cross training. And right now, everyone's getting a chance to be cross trained and also going through formalized training for ATF compliance, our ERP system,
Yeah.
our CRM. So we're trying to expose everyone to all of our tools. And, I also, I'd like to call out our IT team. They've been great to help us to get situated using AI to help us with our production planning, looking at, what our open orders are and scheduling. So, I mean, it's pretty dynamic to see what they can do with that. And I believe that's really why we've had a really strong, successful July.
Well, this is a very progressive. Historically, Silencer Co. has been very progressive and for many years cutting edge. The company that everyone wanted to go to because Jonathan was always ahead of the curve. And I think that Syndicate has, brought that with that holding company. And it's clear that ZEV is embracing that. Could you perhaps talk a little bit about this director of operations role? And it's reporting directly to you, to the co-presidents. Why did you structure it that way? And what does that say about how critical it is? And maybe talk about what's the hardest part of this job in the first 90 days and what is that person you're looking for? I think this is probably the real meat and potatoes of our podcast. We want to speak to the director of operations that we're looking for. They want to know, what does their day look like and what kind of challenges are there and what opportunities do they have to solve problems?
Okay. So I believe to answer the first question, the reason why we wanted to have the director of operations report to both of the presidents, it's a critical key position in the organization. I always say that, sales to me, and I grew up in the sales arena, without sales, engineering's got nothing to engineer and production's got nothing to produce and shipping's got nothing to ship, etc. But at ZEV right now, operationally building product and helping to create structure, working with our supply chain director, working with our quality director. We're an organization right now of 37 people. So it's not a massive organization, but we want this person to slide right into the organization, be a great culture fit, and someone who's a good communicator, collaborator, who comes with experience and good ideas. Currently, and I would say the challenge, and I always say this is not impossible. It's just going to take some work. And what we really need to do is we've got to dial in and we've got to be able to do the simple things right. And I keep preaching in a positive way to the team during all company meetings that if we can't do the simple things right, we'll never be able to do the more difficult. And right now, we've got to get the simple things dialed in. We've got to get our house in order. We've made that move from Washington and we've got the shop set up. But I personally believe the director of operations is going to come in and he or she will want to make their mark. And I feel that we're going to have to do a, a layout revision to what we currently have in terms of inflow, outflow. And, we want that person to come in and bring that experience and that vision as to how this is going to flow.
Yeah,
So
you're looking for a leader. I mean, you don't want someone that's going to, you're looking for a leader and there's career room to grow here in this company. This is not a boring job that you're going to have. There's never going to be a day that is the same thing every day. It's going to be
absolutely
different.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I talk about communication, collaboration,
Yeah.
they also have to be a good planner, forward thinking. You know, I, I personally, I look at someone who, they gather their team every morning and they understand what the pace is for the day. And we've got it all mapped out. based on, our AI tools and our production planning. We know what our bogeys are for today, tomorrow, and we've got a well planned and it's well communicated. And, another thing that, we want to stress is, those teams, they've got to be well informed. People in shipping, people in compliance, assembly, our inventory team. And, I always say your best performing teams are your most informed. So he's got to be, or she's got to be someone who is constantly communicating. And we're also setting up monitors back in assemblies so that, we can see what the target is for the day and how we're tracking. So,
Yeah.
but, and I do want to stress that, even though they report to the co-president, and it's not to micromanage that person, it's to support them and to understand what they need. And, that's why we're doing it that way.
And you're reachable. That is one thing that people have said about you when you are managing teams. You are reachable. This person is not, they're not going to be pointed, here, go do it, and you leave. You are available to help guide and support them so they can succeed. But we're not looking for someone who needs to be taught how to do this job. We're looking for someone who's ready to take that next step, almost someone who's ready to grow a company, because this is going to go from where you are now to boom. It's going to be all of a sudden there's going to be a growth spurt.
To add what you just said, looking for someone who's not going to wait for direction. We're looking for someone who's going to point the direction.
Yeah.
And, recently with new team members in supply chain and quality, those are that's a trait that they both came to us with. And it's exciting to see how quick they're moving. And, that's the type of individual that we want for the director of operations.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like a pretty exciting career opportunity. Let's change a little bit and talk a little bit. You alluded to the compliance, and I'm glad to hear you guys. It's one thing that is really nice about this organization. You really believe in training your people, and the people are better for it. You're investing in them. And not only do they do a better job at work, but they're happier and they have a chance to learn new things. And I think you do tend to, in my experience, knowing you, you tend to look for people who are forever learners, that are always hungry to learn something else. You're not looking for a know-it-all.
That's correct. That was one of the things that, so Taylor Good, our other president, we talked about this position and how important it is, but for the culture, that was one of the traits, is that we wanted to instill continuous learning, whether it was internal or encouraging people to take classes outside. One of the things that we set up, we actually have a gunsmith locally in Utah coming in, and he's going to spend a half a day with the staff on a Thursday afternoon. And we want to start teaching people just, tips and tactics and, what to look for. And so we're doing that. We do have we've got a business coach that's going to come in and work with our leadership team.
That's great.
Trying to build that internal spirit of this team and this culture is what we're doing.
That's fantastic. People are starving for that. There's a lot of manufacturers in our industry that do not invest in their people. They hire them and say, go accomplish this. But this is very special because this does not happen everywhere. Let's talk a little bit about, how the company is investing and in compliance. This job in particular has enormous regulatory weight. How does ZEV think about building a compliance first culture from day one rather than bolting it on later? Is that part of this education, or how does that go right now?
So what we did is we did invest in a regulatory compliance team member, and she's absolutely wonderful. Right. She comes to us with about 15 years of experience, and we're doing lunch and learns and with some of the different departments. But in the case of Emily's department with compliance, regulatory, safety, we're holding sessions so that, we're starting with the basics. And then, we've got what I would call the ZEV curriculum. And every lunch and learn, we're exposing people to a little bit more. We want them to understand it instead of just throwing everything at them at once. So, that's something that we're doing on a regular basis. And I personally believe people really like it. We're building that knowledge bank, and the cross training in case someone needs to step out, maybe for an illness or for a vacation. We've
Yeah.
got backup now.
Oh, it's fantastic. That takes the pressure off and also protects your compliance. So, when you're thinking about this particular role, where does the director of operations pick up and what does ongoing compliance ownership look like once they're in that seat? How do they interact with all this?
So, from what I see, the director of operations does not need to be an absolute expert in ITAR, understanding ATF compliance. That's why we've got Emily.
Mhm.
So, Emily would, or another member of our team would support the director of operations. We want him to be or she fluent to understand the basics, but know that they've got someone on their staff that is basically there to help answer questions and address any concerns. So, I mean, that's how I see it, and I believe that'll work very well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, kind of wrapping up a little bit, and I just think it's an amazing opportunity, just not the job alone, but the bigger picture. There's so many opportunities for career growth with this company because of the holding company and the sister companies, not to mention the executive team and the leadership team. It is phenomenal. Can you tell us a little bit about, talk a little bit about you and your co-president and your team, and tell us a little bit about you guys, because one of the things we do is our one-way videos. We ask people to tell us about them and, who's going to fit into your group? What is everybody like? What do they joke around about? What's the office culture really feel like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, it's funny. I look at the diversity of the team, and we do have a lot of veterans, which I love working with them. Just the stories, their passion. So we've got some Marines, we've got some Rangers, couple Air Force. My co-president Taylor, 24 years in the Navy, SEAL Team 6 operator. So it's
No competition at all in that group. None.
well, it's a competitive group, and there's a lot of adrenaline going on, and but I would also say, when we have to buckle down and get serious, we know exactly how to buckle down and get serious, and
Yeah.
and have those critical discussions and planning. So yeah, I mean it's a great group, and what I like personally is the passion, the enthusiasm, the what can I do today to help? I know that, I'm not as busy as I should be, but where can I go and help someone out? I mean, so that's kind of the culture that we have right now. And I think also I've never seen a group of people get more excited over donuts, which is kind of funny. But and if you're gonna bring in donuts for Zev, you've got to bring in donuts for the syndicate team. And next thing you know, you're bringing in 6 dozen donuts. And yeah, so and
It
it's
is
something else that we people get to bring their dogs to work,
Oh, right. I
and
forgot.
I'm always wondered how that would work, and it's really kind of neat. They sit on people's desks, they've got a pillow, you're having some stressful, meetings, and you go over, and the next thing you know, you're hanging out with a golden retriever puppy, and they're
Yeah.
chewing on your shoelace, and but I really commend. I always say that it always starts at the top. So with what Lance has done at Syndicate and what Taylor has started to do with Zev and Scott at Silent Chicago, I mean, you can see how things are starting to gel, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm very impressed with it.
That's great.
Yep.
Well, it's a great opportunity, and I would like to share with our listeners, if you're interested in this, or if time has passed and we've filled this job and you're interested in jobs like this, then reach out to me. I will be the point person on this and working with the leadership team, but we are actively recruiting, and this podcast will go live very quickly, and we'll be advertising for this. So if you're hearing this, and it is within a short period of time, you better reach out to me right away, because we're going to get someone in this place. We've got a lot of firearms to make and a lot of parts to make. So thank you, Jeff, very much for taking the time to talk about this position and letting people know about ZEV. It's really exciting. And I actually have quite a few people waiting for me to send this link. I have told them you are going to be recording this. So there are a lot of fans that are waiting to watch your podcast. So thank you very much for taking the time to tell people about ZEV and the really exciting future.
You're welcome. I think one thing I want to just touch on is I think what makes me extremely excited is the dedication and the support when it comes to product innovation and product development. What I see on our product roadmap on the next 3-4 years is mind-boggling. It's exciting. And I really believe the media is going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to ZEV.
Yeah, agreed.
So-
I've heard there's quite a few really special projects. I do believe you have received a text message from me more than once saying, when do I get that firearm off the line?
Well, like I said, we've got some really dynamic people. Victor and Trent are doing a phenomenal job, and it's going to be exciting to watch all this come to fruition.
Yeah, really great people in your sister companies that are all working together on these products. They're no slouches for sure.
Yeah.
Well, anyone who's interested, reach out. Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate you being on the podcast. And for those who are listening, keep tuning in because we will keep having more podcasts like this and talking about these amazing manufacturers and companies in our industry and the remarkable people. That's it for HeadHunters Northwest podcast. Until next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Shaylene.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HeadHunters Northwest podcast. Specialized recruiting, specialized approach. You can reach out at headhuntersnw.com or call 605-600-1709. Join us again next week as we look behind the curtain into the global defense, small arms, and shooting sectors. HeadHunters Northwest, finding you the best heads for business.